As you can see, this is a different type of video. I am wearing a black suit with a black shirt and wearing black glasses, although these are more for dramatic effect than really being convenient because it's actually quite dark in here. But I'm wearing this because it is symbolic for the death of a previous version, the letting go of a version that no longer serves us. And the reason I'm making this video is because many of us, we want to grow into the best version of ourselves, the most truest version of ourselves, yet we keep holding on to this old version that we are. And this is a very hard and interesting and complex process as someone who has gone through a certain character death himself, transcending from one version to another. And I wanted to share some of the insights that I've learned in that because it is very important for you to understand as well. Because so many of us find ourselves wanting to grow, longing to be the best version of ourselves, yet we always, for some reason, feel ourselves being pulled back, pulled down by the weight of our old identity. And in order to become the best version of you, in order to become the truest version of you, you have to be able to create the space to actually let that version of you rise. And we do that by letting go of the old. Like a phoenix rises from the ashes, your best identity rises from the space that is created by letting go of the old. Now, philosophy, religion, and neuroscience all talk about these things where they focus on leaving behind the old and transcending into a higher version of yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, calls this self-overcoming. Carl Jung calls this individualization and dealing with that shadow self and knowing how to integrate our shadow into a more whole and truer version of ourselves. Even though some philosophers might not agree with that, like Dostoevsky, I do believe, and I have experienced, that we are able to let go of our old self and actually become someone entirely new. We are able to change ourselves into the person that we really want to be. The things that we once were are never really going to leave, but we learn to live with that. But in order to do so, I have noticed that there is a need of ritual, basically, that you have to go through. You cannot just simply say goodbye and here we go new. Because if it was that easy, then everyone would be happy, fulfilled, and no one would self-sabotage or self-destruct. But the truth is that that is not the case. And people do find themselves right back where they started. So how do we actually go about this? Well, I want to share some of the insights that I have been able to understand since I have gone through a lot of changes myself, in the hope that it will help you to become more aware of these things, because it's not as hard as it seems, but it is an uncomfortable process because this old version of ourselves, right, this version has brought us to where we are right now. And this is why it's often so hard to let go, because our nervous system, our entire brain structure, our entire emotional state has been tied and basically addicted to this version of ourselves. And this version has maybe even gotten us through a lot of difficult periods. But often the old version is built upon chaos, on scarcity, on survival. None of these are elements that will help you in order to become the best version of yourself, because the best version of yourself isn't wired, isn't programmed on these elements. It is programmed on abundance, love, peace, and safety. So in order to become that version, we have to install this new code, basically. We have to rewire our identity. And that process can be quite interesting, can be quite hard for a lot of people. And a lot of people find themselves, I call it the limbo phase. It's the phase between the old version of you and becoming the new. There is this phase where you just don't really understand, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to become? And a lot of people in that phase get pulled back to their old identity because that is safe, that is comfortable. And we are simply wired for safety and comfortable and what keeps us familiar. That's what our brain and our nervous system does. So fighting against that is something that can be quite hard, but I have found certain ways that might help you a bit in this as well. What really helped me to understand and to basically let the best version of me rise is understanding that that version is already there, right? It is not something new that you have to become, but it's really more about removing all of these old elements that make up who you are. So it is about becoming very aware of the system that you are running on now, the wiring that is making up your current identity. Most people who want to become a better version of themselves have to accept that they currently have an identity which is mainly based upon struggle. So survival, for example, scarcity, chaos, constantly having your back against the wall, is one of the reasons why we often become very successful, because it helps us push through very difficult periods. But obviously that is a system that we have created which doesn't allow us to actually enjoy life, live in fulfillment, be our truest self, and actually do the things that we really want to do, because we don't know how to do that. Our nervous system isn't wired for that. So it's very important that you become aware of these things, the things that basically block you from becoming the best version of yourself. Because if you do not do this, then no matter what you will try in order to become the best version of you, you will always feel the weight of your old identity pulling you back, pushing you down, which is where most people find themselves when it comes to character death, or, transcending into the highest version of themselves. In my opinion, this is a very spiritual process. But once you become very aware of these things, once you understand this system that you have been running on, which has been governing your life, every single decision that you make, this is the reason why your relationships fail, it's the reason why you turn to self-sabotage, for example, because sometimes creating chaos is the only way that we understand how to survive. But that is obviously not the same system that we want to use in order to grow, to become the best version of ourselves. That system doesn't work to create meaningful relationships. That system doesn't work to create from abundance. That system doesn't help us to be absolutely creative. That system doesn't help us to focus on our passion. So that system is keeping us small. It's keeping us to what it's used to. And that is why it's so hard to let go. But once you become aware of these things, right, it becomes easier to discipline oneself from the inside out. This is what the Stoics basically refer to in their scriptures, is where it's understanding this concept of the self and understanding what is actually running the show, your subconscious programming, understanding these blocks, recognizing them in certain situations. And this basically comes down to understanding how you react to certain things that happen in your life, because the system that has been running you is probably a reactive system. You don't really think about what you do most of the time. 95% of the time, you are run by your subconscious. So this is why Carl Jung says this very beautifully. Most people find themselves in this endless loop of misery, and they call it fate. Until we make the subconscious conscious, people will find themselves in the same constant loop and call it fate. The Stoics, they talk about this in a sense of becoming disciplined, becoming aware of oneself, becoming aware of the system that you've been running on, and then choosing actively between impulse and decision. There has to be this space that we create where we can reflect and see what happens in order to train our new identity. So identity is a muscle, okay? Identity is not something that you just kind of tap into or discover or whatever it is. It is something that you train. You have to train your new nervous system, or your nervous system, your identity basically, your thoughts and all those kind of things, to allow yourself to make different decisions. Because the only way to change is through repetition. It is not by some magical, miraculous moment that just opens up everything. No, it does not work like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It is done through constant repetition, because our nervous system and our brain and our identity doesn't recognize what we want, it recognizes what we do over time. And eventually, we will have to create an identity that is built upon safety, abundance, love, peace, and creativity, because those are usually the things, the elements that actually allow ourselves to live fully, authentically, and express ourselves fully. If you are interested, and if you're thinking about why you end up in the same place, why you feel like you are not able to live a fulfilling life, or why it always feels like you're in this never-ending chase, or you're always missing something, the life that you have created now doesn't align with the system that is running the show inside. So this is why we feel this incongruence, and that is what creates this tension. Now, this is where self-sabotage eventually comes from, because this tension needs to be resolved. And most people resolve this by either self-sabotaging so they get back to what is familiar, or they resolve this tension by, for example, taking drugs, seeking out distractions, because we need to create a narrative, a story for ourselves in order to be able to keep living, right? Keep functioning. And this is where the root cause of most people's misery comes from. And it's just not necessary. becoming aware, understanding these concepts really helped me in order to grow from one type of person and one character, because I was doing the exact same things. I was needing external validation. My whole identity was based on survival mode. I always needed to have that feeling of my back against the wall, of a storm, because I thrived under chaos. But then when I created an environment for myself where peace was actually the thing that was all around me, I didn't know how to deal with that. So I self-sabotaged again in order to create the same chaos that brought me to that exact peace, which is kind of like funny and weird if you think about it, right? Because that is just a never-ending cycle. We fight our way out of a war, then we win the war, but the system still governs that. The system is still wired for war. And that is the reason why so many people don't feel like they can't really be present. They can't really have meaningful relationships. They constantly find themselves chasing the next big thing. They constantly find themselves, I always call it wired but tired. You know, they're constantly on, yet they are still tired because they're tired of this old identity. And if you truly want to change, you have to understand these concepts. You have to understand the concept of letting go of the old in order to create space, which is going to be very uncomfortable, and then to build the new, to train the new. So this is also why it's very important that you understand very clearly where you want to go. I've spoken about this in a previous video as well, where it's about creating new standards, which is one of the best ways to actually design your future, not by setting goals, but by setting standards. So I would highly recommend watching that video as well. And eventually, what does this turn into? Once you truly become the best version of yourself, performance in every single aspect of your life will increase. Relationships, if you're a business owner, your business will become better. You will be able to lead your team better. Finances will grow. Your physique will grow. Every single aspect will grow because your life and everything on the external will calibrate to the frequency that you have now positioned yourself in by training yourself. The outer world doesn't change. Well, it can change if you force it to be, but eventually, if you don't change on the inside, the external world and everything will be a reflection of what you are on the inside. So this is why identity change, in my opinion, is so important, and it's the reason why so many people feel lost, put in so much effort to create a life only to self-sabotage it, or put in so much effort to create a life only to then not be able to enjoy that life or be present or grow from that life. And that is just a waste of time, a waste of life. And these things are very complex, but once we understand them, we can actually make something of it. And this is what I have gone through myself as well. And I wanted to give you these insights. So that was it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there's anything that you need help with. Obviously, let me know in the comments. Give this video a like. And if you want to know more about what I do and how you can change into becoming the best version of yourself, live authentically, be true, create more performance in every single area of your life, level up in every single area of your life through identity shifting instead of trying to force everything and still feeling like shit, then send me a message on Instagram or click on one of the links below in the description, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.